Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Tech Talk with DigitalOcean and myself, Chris on Code. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Today, we are going to be talking about authenticating APIs, specifically a REST API. If you're interested in a GraphQL API, we will do that in a future webinar. But yeah, right now we're going to do REST APIs. So this is a good webinar to get started with if you are learning about how to authenticate with APIs. APIs are kind of what makes the entire web dev world go around these days. So we'll talk about authenticating, what a JSON Web Token is, and the tools to authenticate. So I want to get right into it. Thank you, everybody, for joining. If you are interested, this talk will be recorded, and you can find the recording on our YouTube channel, youtube.com, and just search for DigitalOcean. And also, we are going to be emailing any links, relevant links inside of this webinar to you after the webinar. We'll also email you the recording. Let's see, what else do we got to talk about? If you are interested in asking any questions, there is a little questions box that you can throw questions into and we'll answer them as we go or at the end of the webinar. So let's get started. Here we are at DigitalOcean.com. We are going to be authenticating a strappy API. And if you followed along with my previous webinars, we've done a lot of strappy content. And I'm personally really liking strappy the more I do. So here we go. We're going to start an API real quick. And I know this is probably old news if you saw the last ones, but we'll do it really quickly. If you are interested in spinning up a strappy API real quick, we have a DigitalOcean marketplace app where you can create a strappy API in one click. For us, we're going to work locally today. Here's strappy.io, and we're going to go to their quick start. We go down here, and we're going to create a strappy API really quick. We're going to call it my project. So we're going to let that run. And question in the chat real quick is any prerequisites required for this webinar? I would say none. Maybe a little bit of familiarity with APIs and how you can get data from an API, especially a REST API, using a GET request, a POST request. And let me open up my VS Code and let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. So let me zoom in a bunch. This is what I use instead of slides. I'm too lazy to make slides. So here we are. We're going to say step one, we're going to create the API. I hope that's large enough. Let me zoom in further. Okay, so we're going to create the API. And then we're going to talk about the different parts of an API. For getting requests, you usually are going to do a get. And let's say we create a resource called posts. So let's say we actually, oh, there we go. There's our strappy admin dashboard started up. Let me go back and talk about our notes. So two, we're going to create the API, create a post type. So to get all posts, we're going to do /posts. To create a post, and that should be 3. To create a post, we are going to do a post request. So traditionally in APIs, get is for when you want to get content. Post is for you when you want to create content, and that's just going to go straight to the post. And if you are trying to update a piece of content, that's usually a put or a patch request, and that'll be on posts and then the ID of the post that you want to update. So ideally, you should be able to get all the posts if you are an unauthenticated user. And if you want to create a post, we probably want you to be authenticated, right? We probably want you to have an account on our platform or whatever app you're building. You probably want users to have an account before they create a resource. If you want to update a resource like a post, you probably definitely want them to be authenticated, one, and you want them to be authorized. Like an author should be the only one that should update their own post. Like we don't want, I shouldn't be able to go to like medium.com and update anybody else's post, right? So that's the things we're going to do in this webinar. I actually didn't even need the numbers since there's like VS Code has numbers here. Question here, is this applicable to any general droplet? Yes, since Strappy is a Node API, we're going to do a Node API stuff right here, but APIs are I would say, language agnostic. So you could do this as a Ruby on Rails API, a Laravel PHP API, or a Node API. And APIs like this get, post, put patch, and then if you want to delete, delete is the HTTP request for delete, and you can do posts like you want to delete post number 5, and you for sure should be the owner of this if you're trying to delete that. So we're going to worry about all of these, and let's say before all that is creating a user and authenticating. So that's kind of our agenda today. That should take us to right around 45 minutes. And then if you want, we have questions for everything after the fact. I think this happened in the last webinar. If you have trouble hearing, there might be a mute button that's turned on or something like that. Definitely give that a try. So let's go back to our Strappy dashboard. We're going to create a Strappy API, which is a Node API. So we're going to say, my name is Chris. Password, I'm going to type in password since this is a local dashboard and none of you have access to it. I'm going to go my DigitalOcean email. Feel free to email me with any questions, comments, whatever. And we're going to go ready to start. So let's say we have our API here, right? And we have our Strappy dashboard, excuse me. We're going to create our first content type, where it's right here, content type. And if you are, I'm going to speed through this, but if you're interested, we have previous tech talks and webinars about creating the API. We want to focus on the authentication part today. So I'm going to create post. It's going to continue. And then let's say text, we want a title field, right? And then I'm going to go to add another field here. And then I want rich text. I want this to be content. And then I'm going to finish. So now our post type only has 2 things, content and title. So we'll save that. And then I'll go to posts and we'll create a new post. Sorry, I'm speeding through this. My first post, we want to get to the authentication part. I am a post. And now we'll click save. All right, so now we have the first part of our project here. We have our dashboard, we have our API. So next up, we should be able to create our REST API. And the cool thing about Strappy is it already gives it to us. We go to localhost 1337/posts, and we have an API, but it is 403 forbidden because we don't have access to it yet. We're going to go into the Strappy dashboard, roles and permissions. And this is where we're going to do a lot of work. We are going to be looking at this public role and this authenticated role here. So if we look at this authenticated role, these are the 2 default roles that Strappy will give us. We can also add in other roles like admin, editor, or anything like that. But for us, we're going to stick to these 2 for today. So let's go to this public role. We want to say all public users should be able to find. So that means just get and see all the posts or find one post. And we'll hit save here. And if you're familiar with APIs, let's go here. We're going to go to /posts, press enter. And now we have our content in our API. Really easy there. And if we want to see a single post, we do / the ID, which is 1 right here. And then if I hit enter, then we'll get only one object right there. All right, so when we go back to our API, let's say that we only want authenticated users to create a post. So let's go down here, authenticated. We're going to say authenticated users are allowed to create. So we'll hit save there. And now public users are allowed to see all the posts, and then so public users are allowed to see posts and also see a single post. Authenticated users, however, are able to create posts. All right, so when we are doing this, we are going to first create a user so that they can authenticate. Question here, what is Strappy using as a data layer? Where are these resources being saved? So since I'm local, it is using SQLite database. if you host it on a hosting provider like DigitalOcean, you can use either MongoDB, Postgres, MySQL, whatever you need, and connect directly to it. So the cool thing is that Strappy kind of hides that data layer for you. It makes all the connections required, but you don't have to worry about what type of database you're using. You just have to know that the database and the content in it is yours to own. So next up, we have posts and we have users right here. Let's go ahead and create a user from the API. In order to do authentication authorization, we probably should have a user. So let's go here. We're going to add a user. Username, I'm going to do Chris on code, which is my Twitter username. Email, I don't know why there's an @ symbol there. That's kind of weird. All right, that's my email. And password, I'm just going to type in as password, and then I will do on right here. All right, so let's hit save. And now we have a brand new user, no saving there and no saving there. Cool. So let's see, there is a question in chat. Is the difference between Strappy and Contentful? The first one is self-hosted. So yes, that is the biggest difference, I would say. Strappy is a self-hosted open source CMS, which you can use as your API. So there's a lot of benefits to that. You can host it on DigitalOcean and you know that your pricing is just the price of your hosting, so your droplets. The other cool thing is that you own the data, right? It goes to your database. You can export from that database. You can grab from that database. You can do whatever you want. Contentful is hosted by Contentful. So that means you can export your data, but they do have the database on their servers and all that good stuff. And the other big difference I would say is the UI. And then I would say try both or any other headless CMS, and then try to figure out which UI dashboard you prefer for your own workflow, especially if you have non-coders on your team. It could be easier to use one or the other. Can we specify the database to be used locally? Yes, you can. There was a command I used right here for this -- quick start, which basically says use SQLite, but you can definitely point it towards MySQL, Postgres, or MongoDB locally. Okay. Question here, what is the authentication method? Is it a bearer token? Yes, it is. And we're going to talk about that in a second after we authenticate this user. So let's say I have a user, Chris on code. My password in here is password. The next step is let's see if we can't hit this API to check if we can authenticate with this user. So anytime you have an API, you're going to want to do a post request to the authentication endpoint to get authenticated. So let's do that. I'm going to use a tool called Insomnia, and Insomnia is a tool that basically helps you. Look at this. I have a bunch of old. Delete that. Authenticating. Let's copy that actually, and then let's delete this one. I'm going to start fresh here. Okay. So Insomnia is a tool to help you examine and test APIs. You might be familiar with a tool called Postman, but I will be using Insomnia. I just like the UI a little bit better, and it seems to be faster in my eyes. But both are very good tools. You could even use curl if you wanted from your terminal and just do everything through that. But here I'm going to create a new request called authenticate user. And right here, it's a GET request. I'm going to change this over to a POST request. And if you're wondering how I'm getting all this, if we go to the Strappy docs, which are very good docs, by the way, resources, docs, you can search for authenticate, or maybe it's called login, one of the two. Authentication login right here. This right here, you can do an axios.post. This is the URL that we are going to use to authenticate a user. Let me zoom in for you all. So we're going to do localhost 1337/auth/local, and that's our authentication endpoint that Strappy gives us out of the box. There's a question about third-party identity providers. We will talk about that towards the end of this. Right now, I want to focus on Strappy's built-in login information, login system, and then we're going to talk about bringing in third-party at the end of this. Cool. All right. That's a lot of stuff to go through in 15 minutes so far, but let's power through. We're going to go to this /auth/local, and we need to pass in two parameters. We have identifier and password. Identifier looks to be the email here. Okay, so let's go back here. We're going to do a multi-part form. We're going to say identifier and is the email. And this is something I created. I hope that's large enough for you all. Let me zoom in one more. So we have the identifier, and now we have password, which embarrassingly is password. And I'm going to paste in that link right there. So if this works, we should be able to get back what's called a JSON Web Token. So if I send that, we have all of the information here. So it looks like our authentication request worked. And I want to show you what it looks like if it's broken. If I did password 123, which is wrong, I'm going to hit send, and we get status 400, which is a bad error, and a bad request. And then let's see, auth form invalid, identifier or password invalid. I actually expected that to be a 401 unauthorized, but 400 works. Any of the 400 class errors basically says there was a problem. So we'll go back to 123, remove that, hit send, and here we are. So we have a JSON Web Token here, and this JSON Web Token, this little string right here, let me bring it out into VS Code, and let me zoom out. I gotta enable mouse zoom again. So what a JSON Web Token is, if you're not familiar with how JWTs work, is that they are basically split into three different parts. We have three parts here separated by periods. So a period here and a period here. So I'm going to copy all of this right here. And here's a good resource to kind of look at a JWT, JSON Web Token. Let's load this up. JWT.io will let us look at our tokens. So if I go down here, here's a token. I'm going to paste this in, and you'll see that it's broken down into red, pink, and blue, which is just kind of a helpful way to look at these things. Here, the header is in red. There we go. The header is in red, and it's going to say the type of token and the encryption algorithm, which is HS256. And then the second part, which is the purple part, is the important part to us. It's the payload and the data that's coming out of here. So we have an expiration, we have issued at, and then the ID. But you can stuff a bunch of stuff in here, like user information. You definitely want it to be very selective about what you put into this payload. But essentially what you can do here is you can have the API give back information to your front end so that your front end knows who the user is. And this JSON Web Token is how we're going to authenticate with our API. All right, so a question here is, how do you send your username and password securely? You definitely want to have HTTPS as your security protocol. You definitely want to make sure that you're not storing the password anywhere as a plain text. And ideally, the cool thing about Strappy and building out, instead of building out your own custom API, is that a lot of this stuff for security is handled for you, which is really nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, here's our JWT token. What we can say is go to create a new request, and we're going to say create a post. And that will be a post request. And the body is going to be JSON, and I'll create that. So question here is, where do you save the token? It can depend on your application. If your front end is a JavaScript front end, which is very likely since this is a headless CMS, you have to bring your own front end. There are many options. It really depends on your application. Some people say local storage is fine. Some people say cookies are good. Some people also say don't ever store the token locally, which is interesting. But it all depends on your application and your security requirements, really. There's a lot of resources from Auth0, like a third-party security provider, where they talk about where you should store it. So definitely take a look at that. All right, so let's see. Let's create some content right here. I'm going to go title is my post from an API. And then, well, I need a comma there. And then we're going to do content. This is content. And then we need to do HTTP localhost 1337. And I'm doing localhost 1337 here. Once you deploy this to something like DigitalOcean and then add your own custom domain, then all of this would be at add a custom domain and your SSL cert. You can do HTTPS like myapi.com/posts, right? But since we're local, it will be HTTP localhost 1337, and we're going to do posts. So you might be thinking, well, this looks really similar to the other request that we did, which if I do another one, get all posts, and that'll be a GET request. This one will be HTTP localhost 1337 posts, and if I send that, it gets all the posts. The difference here is the URL string is the same, but it's the HTTP method that's used. So this is a GET request. This is a POST request. If I send it, it's forbidden, right? And that's because we said in the Strappy dashboard, only authenticated users can create posts. So the way that we can authenticate is if we go here, header, we're going to say authorization, and then we're going to do bearer, and we're going to copy in the token that we got from this other request here. So I'm going to copy this right here, right there, go over to create a post, paste it in right there after the bearer. So it's bearer, and that's just like the syntax that you use to send the token in. You say bearer space, and then you paste your token in. Or if you stored it locally, like in local storage or something, then you would add it here. Then you hit send, and everything works as it should. So now you get the data back from the post that you created. And then if we go to our dashboard, somewhere in here, yep. Here's our Strappy dashboard. We can go to posts, and now we have a post that was from an API, which is cool. All right, let me go through some questions real quick. I'm trying to do them like every 5-10 minutes. I'll look at the questions. Let's see. Nice using Node in your app. Creating a JWT is a time-taking process. The cool thing about this is that Strappy created the JOT for us, and that's the shorthand. JOT is kind of how you say JWT. That's just what the industry has landed on, JOTs. Let's see. So yeah, we've been able to create an API. We're able to authenticate the API. We're able to log into the API. And now we have created an authenticated post from the API. So that's a lot to do it's been 24 minutes. So a lot of good progress here. And I would say a good option rather than creating the API by scratch all by yourself, right? All right, so let's see. Seems like people prefer Insomnia over Postman. I haven't tried it. Why do you choose to use Insomnia? I personally like Insomnia because, and I don't know if Postman's changed it. If I'm typing in here, I can press enter, or wherever I am, press enter. Just kidding. Press enter and it'll send the request. I think Postman got rid of that. They might have brought it back, but also Insomnia on this computer, on my computer, is faster. Okay, so the next question here, right, is, okay, Chris, you created a user from the dashboard and then you logged in through the API. Is there a way to create a user from the API as well? Because it wouldn't make sense for every user to go into your dashboard to create a user, right? You want them to have like a login form and then they can authenticate that way. So here, I'm going to say, let's go into here. We're going to create a new one called create a user, and it's going to be a post request because anytime we want to create, we are going to do a post. And you might be wondering, well, this one was a post, but it was just authenticating. In my eyes, it's creating a JWT from our user credentials. There are questions on JWT token lifespan. Strappy has that built in. You can definitely look at their docs. I wish I knew the syntax offhand, but they do have support for it. They do have support for refresh tokens, I believe. So yeah, you can handle all that, and Strappy is your backend, can do it all. So let's go to create a user. I believe it's going to be the same as the create a post. Sorry, authenticate a user right here. We'll go to create a user. Actually, I think it's different. Let's go back, and this is just for me running around their docs a few times. So let's go register. That's not the thing. Let's go login, authentication/login, and then let's scroll down. That's authentication right here. So that's login. Let's see if registration is somewhere in here. I just want a URL. That's a forgotten password. That's built in. That's cool. Reset password is also cool. There's got to be a register somewhere in here. Here, registration. Okay, so it's /auth/local/register. Cool. All right, so let's copy all this. Let's go back over here, and it needs username, email, and password. Okay, so let's go back here. We're going to go to that's that. And then for body, we're going to do a form. We're going to do username, email, and password. So the cool thing here is that all of this can happen on a front end like React or Vue or whatever you're using. But let's say username is Chris3, I guess. And let's do 3 at DigitalOcean. This is how I test my APIs, is I randomly put numbers everywhere. Let's do password. Okay, so let's create this user. It shouldn't need authentication because it's by default, you're not authenticated if you're hitting the registration URL, right? So we'll hit send. It looks like user ID is 2, and now we get a new JWT that we can use to create a user. So let's go back here to our dashboard. I got to close tabs here. Let's refresh. And now we have 2 users. So yes, we have the ability to create a user from the API. Question here. You used the access token from a previous request. Is the token unique for each request or is unique for each user? So a token is unique for each user. So I can log in right here, authenticate a user. I'll send that. I'll get this JWT. And basically, I can use this JOT for until this JOT expires. And you can set your expiration for your JSON Web Token. But always the user will be stored in this JOT, and your Strappy API will know that this token belongs to this user right here. Are JOTs recreated upon each authentication? Let's find out. Okay, so let's copy this. Let's see if we can't see the difference here. I think that was different because that part changed. Yeah, so they are different per authentication. As soon as you send the request, the Strappy dashboard just creates a brand new JOT and sends it back. Cool. All right. So what's next on our agenda? We are able to create via the API. All right. So let's talk about. We've done authentication. The next part of this is authorization. So it makes sense that we can create posts, but we need to be able to restrict a post based on the person that created it. Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's go here. First of all, each post, let me open a post. There's no way to know what the owner of this post is, right? So there's no way to know who created this post. So you have to do a little bit of work in Strappy to make the connection. So let's go to Content Types Builder. And here are the posts. We're going to add another field. We have title, we have content. Let's add another. We're going to add a relation. And then we're going to change this out to be user. So here we have a post has a user. You could also call this author, whichever one you prefer. So a post has a user. A user has many posts. So this is how we do a one-to-many relationship in Strappy. You kind of just click these buttons. How cool is that? So super cool. User has many posts. We'll do that is right there. So now this post type has a user relation. We hit save, it'll restart. So now if we go to posts, we can go here and say, oh, here's a user. Let's make that Chris on code, save that. So now this one post has a user, the rest do not. So we're going to get a little bit into some code right now. This is where you have to do a little bit of custom work for Strappy to do your work. What we're going to do is in the dashboard, we're going to say, hey, anytime a post is created from the API, we always want the person that created the post to be assigned as the user, if that makes sense. So the docs have a very good way to do this. We have this right here. I actually have links in my notes, which I'll send you all my note links here. Let's see, updating. Let's see, I think it was this one, creating via the API. Okay, in the Strappy docs, there's a section called apply the author by default. And I want to show you something really cool about Strappy is you might be wondering, okay, I have this dashboard. It sounds really cool, but it sounds like it could hinder my progress, right? It could slow down my workflow if I wanted to customize something. So the cool thing about Strappy is if I go here, I'm going to open this up. What did we call it? My project? I'm going to open this up in code. And I hope this is large enough. The cool thing about this is everything in the dashboard corresponds to something in code. And you can have this repo, you can have all these files in your GitHub repo or wherever, and you can update your GitHub repo and deploy it to DigitalOcean so that your dashboard is in sync with your GitHub repo. So if we have a post type here, we created it in the dashboard. It created this folder. If we go to services here, or sorry, models, we can go to post settings.json, and everything in this attribute section corresponds to what was in our dashboard, right? So title, content, and user. So what I can do here is I can do another thing called like, I don't know, weather. That makes no sense, but let's do it. We can say, okay, weather is a string. So I save that, and then I think our terminal might crash. Yeah, so our terminal crashed. Let's close that out. Now let's restart our server. It's yarn develop, I think. So we restart our server, and then we go back into our dashboard. And now this post type right here has that weather field. So really cool because the code corresponds to your API, right? Or the code corresponds to your dashboard. Super cool. So let's talk about updating our API so that a user is applied on creation. So to make that a little bit simpler, I know I'm talking in circles here. We're going to, one, authenticate. We're going to get a JSON Web Token. And then we're going to create a post. And then I should be the owner of that post. So if we go here, we have this apply the author by default. What you can do is under article/controllers/article.js, ours is called post.js, you can add a create function. So let me copy all this. Actually, let me copy all of this and I'll talk through what exactly it does because it's not as scary as the code looks. So here we are under controllers. Basically, this is a way for you to update a record before it gets saved to the database. So what this is saying is, all right, there's a lot here, but what I want to change is we have data.user, user ID. Okay, so this context.state.user.id is coming from our JSON Web Token, which is really cool. And then it's saying, hey, data.user, save this whole thing right here. So we're basically saying whatever is coming through the JSON Web Token, save it as part of that post that gets created. So ideally, if we go over to our, actually article all needs to change to post because that's what we called it. Okay, so that should be good. Let's go over here. And I know I'm rushing through things. We have about 9 more minutes. Let's go to create a post. let's send this in, and hopefully this works. Okay, so it sent it in, and also the user object got added as well, which is really cool. So what that did is basically say, okay, when something gets created, we're just going to save something to data.user and then throw that into the database as a relationship. So if you're wondering if the dashboard is limiting, the cool thing is that the dashboard is not limiting because you can update your controller, models, and services. So Strappy lets you do the code and also the dashboard side of things. All right, so the question here is, let me speed through this last part because we want to say, okay, only Chris should be able to update this post now, right? So the thing that we can do here is we're going to go over here to our docs. There's a doc right here called limit the update. So we're going to go back into controllers /post.js for us. And then down here, instead of this create one, we're going to say on update, we have to make sure that the author is the person that can update it. So there's a lot of code here. Let's just go ahead. There's two really important parts here. One is this, where it goes to look in the database to find a post with the ID and a post with that author's ID. If that does not exist, then it says, hey, you're unauthorized, you cannot update this post. And that's how it handles it. So if we go here, let's copy all this. We're going to go back to our code right here. Here's our create. Here's our update right here. And then we have to change all this because we called it post, not article. So delete, 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 post right there. And then also we called it user ID. Okay, so all that code is basically saying on update, check to see if the owner is the person that is doing the update. So let's double check this right here. This is the post that I just created, ID of 4. So let me go here. I'm going to go to create a new request called update a post. And that should be a put. We're going to say HTTP localhost 1337 and posts 4. Body is going to be JSON. We're going to say I want to update the title to be my new title. And under our header, we need to do an authorization, but let me show you a shortcut. There is, instead of doing it right in the header, there's an auth option for a bearer token. So it does it right here for you. You can just paste the token in. So let me authenticate a user. Let's see, we have our JSON Web Token here. So let's use that. Let's go to update a post, paste that in as the token. I'm going to hit send. And let's see, we have a 403 forbidden there. Okay. Now, why is that happening? Let's go back to authenticate a user. Okay, that should be the correct token. Let's send it in. Grab this new token. Let's make sure this works. And bearer token right here. Send that in. 403 forbidden. Uh-oh. Here goes the live coding errors. Let's go back to our dashboard and make sure all of our users are in the right spot. So here's a post. Here's post 4. Chris on code is the owner, so that shouldn't be a problem. Uh-oh. So we go back to our API, authenticate a user, that right there, and that right there. Okay. Send it in. Brand new token. Okay. Copy that. Update a post. We want to update the title. Here's our bearer token. All right. Let's try not the bearer token. And let's try to do the header way, which, I mean, it shouldn't be different. Uh-oh. Welcome to live coding, everybody. The ID is number. It's just a username. Wait, Did I make a mistake? Where am I going? There was a 3. Okay, hold on. Authenticated user 3. Send that in. Okay, let's try this token. Thank you, everybody, for chatting with me. Let's go to header. Let's paste this in right there. Send. Still forbidden. Uh-oh. Okay, let's go here. Let's delete some of these. We have 3 minutes left until we go into Q&A mode, so we have to figure this out. All right, so we have my first post. User is here. Let's delete that. And then let's add Chris on code. So it's not the one with the 3. We'll save that. Let's go back to users. This one is this email right here. And password is password. And yes, he is the owner of this my first post. Okay, so now let's go back to Insomnia. We're going to authenticate, not the 3. Can we do identifier as just like username? It does work. Okay. So username, Chris on code, identifier is password, or password is password. And then let's go here. Maybe I did spell bearer wrong. No, it looks like that's okay. Let's delete all this. Oh boy, what's happening? It worked when I prepped for this webinar, I swear. Maybe there's a problem in my code actually. Okay, so context ID. Okay, let entity right there. Post is equal to strappy services post find context.params.id context.state.user ID. That works. If no post, then this is the error. So this is where we're getting caught up right here. So that means this is the problem. Thanks for joining a webinar where things aren't working. Post is here. I wonder if I can console log something and see it in our. Let's try that, right? So let's open up our terminal here. Will this work? Let's go run this. Put right there, 403 forbidden. Okay, so posts for 403. That makes sense. Does it? ID 4 doesn't exist. You're right. So let's go back to 1. Send 1. Still 403. Okay. Well, I promise it worked when I prepped for this, but check this out. I'm going to do this. Oh, this should also be a post right there. Because it says article there, but I called them posts. Does that help? No. All right, well, let me show you how this, oh. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for still hanging out with me. I know the problem here. All of this code is proper. All of what we were doing is correct. But in the dashboard, under roles and permissions, under authenticated, we did not check the update box. So that means no updates were allowed because this was not checked. So if we hit save here, gosh, okay, so if we hit save there, we'll hit update number 1, send, and there is our updated post. Title is my new title. And to prove that that works, let's go here. Let's do Chris on code, or is it Chris 3? Send. We'll get this web token here, my newest super duper title. and we'll paste in this bearer token. This should be 403 forbidden. Unauthorized, you can't update this entry, and that is the error message that came back from this right here. So it works, it's just that Strappy was too good at doing its job. Gosh, okay. So something I want to handle before we get to Q&A is that somebody asked about how to do like a third-party authentication. Let's say you had Auth0 or something, or you had a JSON Web Token from a service outside of Strappy. The cool thing that you can do is under, where are you? You can do a customized JWT validation function where you can create a function that will do all of the checks required for, like, let's say Auth0. You can just use the node code and put it in here, and you can use that as your JSON Web Token validator instead of Strappy's validator. So you can switch out who you're authenticating with. Yeah, so gosh, that got dicey at the end there. But we got through. Let's recap. Let's see if we did everything on our list. We were able to create the API. We are able to create a post type. We were doing create a user and authenticating through the API. We were able to get all posts. We were able to create posts. We're able to update posts and delete. We can handle that really quickly if we go into our dashboard. Let's make sure that it's on. Hit save. And then if we go back to Insomnia, we can, instead of update a post, we can say new request, delete a post. And this should be a delete request right here. HTTP localhost 1337 posts 1. And right now it requires authentication. So let's grab this JSON Web Token right here. We'll go to this delete auth bearer token, paste that in, send, and that should be deleted from the dashboard. Go to posts, gone. No posts are left. The other thing you can do here is limit who can delete that post, and you can do that from the controller file right, where am I? Right here, you can do this in controllers. So we have update, we have create, and you can create one for delete, and then you can limit who can delete a certain post as well. So I hope that was helpful. Really, JSON Web Tokens are used to authenticate with any REST API. It's very standard across the board. It's not Strappy specific. It's not node specific. It's not. You can use it anywhere as long as you create an API and it uses JSON Web Tokens to authenticate. All right, so we have some Q&A here. And if you still have questions, definitely throw them into the questions area and we'll take a look at those. Let's see our list right here. How will the Strappy handle assigning user authorization behind a payment wall? Yes, so the question here is if I have let's say three tiers of users, like a free user, a paid user, and then a super paid user, can Strappy handle authorization like that? Yes, it can. If you go to roles and permissions, you can create a role right here where you can say like super paid user. And then down here, you can say, okay, if my custom post types or my custom types, a super paid user should be able to find like certain types of posts, right? And then there's also more stuff like the content manager, which gets you a lot more fine-grained detail into specific content types. But Strappy is a good solution for having multiple roles with multiple authorizations. Is it possible to add CAPTCHA to the registration and login? Yes, it is. CAPTCHA should be able to, there should be like a marketplace plugin or something. If there isn't one built out of the box, you can go into the code here, and there's a section somewhere in here where you can hook into the login and registration flow, and then you can do your CAPTCHA check there, and then also you would just add it into the front end however you need. Restrictions to registration to only allowed clients. Again, I wish I could tell you where the file is off the top of my head, but the docs are very good. You can hook into the registration flow in one of these files, and then you can do your limit based on client, like any sort of restriction you need, you can do in the code there. Once you publish your application, what happens with Strappy with the database? So Strappy, you can have all of this code right here in a GitHub repo. You can deploy it to DigitalOcean, and then you can tell it to hook into a DigitalOcean droplet database. You can tell it to hook into, we have managed database services like MySQL and Postgres that you can hook into. And you can also tell it to go to MongoDB. But once it's in your DigitalOcean account, you have access to all of that from your DO dashboard. So you would have access to all of that content. Ooh, interesting question. If you want to set up a session-based system, can you use Strappy? I actually am not sure about that. From my understanding, Strappy is very much a headless CMS, but I could be wrong. Definitely check the docs on that. What is the benefit of using the JWT on each post request instead of just sending in a username and password on each post request? So from a performance standpoint, there's the one quick performance gain you get is that you don't have to authenticate the user and do a dashboard check every single time, right? You're just decoding a token once you have the token. So that's more just the server decoding a token. The other benefit to using a JWT instead of just a username password, which I believe is called basic auth. So instead of basic auth, we're going to use a bearer token. The reason you would do so is if we go back to jwt.io, is this payload, you can do more than just username and password. You can add in a user's role in there. So like, let's say they're an admin, you can add in role is admin in here, and you can use that in your API. So you have more data that you can put into a JOT than user pass. Can I create an authenticated user in the front end by React? Yes, you can, just like we did here in Insomnia. We did create a user. You just hit this /auth/local/register endpoint, and you're able to create a user from the API. Cool. All right, let's see what else on questions. Would you recommend Strappy for all kinds of projects? The more I work with Strappy, the more I would recommend it. I am really liking the ability to create an API with writing very little code. And I also like the ability to get into the code and customize it as I see fit. I would say that Strappy is suitable for all kinds of projects, production level for sure. Because if you talk about scalability, it really depends on your hosting. And if you're on like a managed database, then you never have to worry about your database scaling. You probably might have to worry about the pricing, but and then if you put it on whatever droplets you want, it's whatever you are comfortable with for that scaling. So that's a good solution. All right, so when you push Strappy to production, what is actually shown? The Strappy dashboard is available. So like, let's go to /admin. If I open this up in incognito, this is what would be shown. So you would have to give certain people your their own username and password so that they could get into the dashboard. But this is helpful if you have people on your team that aren't coders, right? And you have like a blog and you say, okay, well, you can go into the dashboard and create blog posts. And you need to know zero technical knowledge. So Strappy is good because it gives you the API you can build on, but it also gives you the dashboard for non-technical users or for just making it easier to kind of click around some code or some resources. Would I recommend to build an API, Go or Node.js? I haven't actually used Go myself. I've heard fantastic things about it. But it all depends on the amount of processing you need, I would think. For me, it doesn't matter because all that matters is that the API endpoints are clean and easy to get to, and it handles a lot of the CRUD type stuff. but it all depends on your application if you want Go or Node. And I wish I could speak more on that. I just don't know Go well enough. Let's see. User can add super role into the token and send back. Yes, that is a very good point. Is there any kind of project that you wouldn't recommend Strappy for? For example, a powerhouse like Laravel can do something that Strappy cannot. There's always that trade-off between full-on control of the code versus something like Strappy where you have access to the code, but also here's the dashboard. So in my mind, there are the hosted CMSs like Contentful, like Prismic, that are very restrictive on what you can do as far as like Strappy, we did the authorization stuff by going into the code, right? So there's that side where it's like super managed. Then here's in the middle where you have the access to like the full database or the full CMS, but also the code, which Strappy I think straddles the middle of the spectrum. And then Laravel, which is super powerful, right? I built Scotch.io on Laravel. Absolutely love the Laravel ecosystem. I think that Strappy can do a lot, but if you're looking to do something super custom that's never been done before kind of thing, I think Laravel is a fantastic solution, or Ruby on Rails, Go, whatever you need. It all depends on the project. I wish it depends is always the answer, right? Let's see, just looking through the questions again. I hope everyone found this helpful. Thanks for hanging out on, oh boy, what is today, Wednesday? All right, we're coming up on right at 1 hour. If your question wasn't answered, we're going to go through and put together a Google Doc and email out the Google Doc with all the questions. You can definitely find the recording on DigitalOcean's YouTube channel once it goes live. If you are interested in some more Strappy content or whatever you're thinking of, let me know. Here's my twitter.com/ChrisOnCode. You can definitely reach me here, DM me there, and I'll definitely respond. I'm also at Sevilleja, which is harder to spell as my last name. Sevilleja at DigitalOcean. Happy to answer questions there as well. The next webinar is going to be creating an API in Laravel. And if you're interested in that, it'll be a good switch up from using the Strappy dashboard so much in our last 3 webinars. If you are interested on that, let's see. If you are interested in trying Strappy really quickly, you can go to DigitalOcean Marketplace and then searching for Strappy. So here's marketplace.digitalocean.com. You can search for Strappy and hit create Strappy droplet, and you can test run Strappy, and it'll be online at an IP address. So you can kind of just click around and see how it goes. But you can have an API up and running in like 3 minutes. Yes, so I built Scotch.io. We have recently joined DigitalOcean. Scotch was always hosted on DigitalOcean, so it was kind of a fun merging. And more Laravel, I am all for it, yes. So yeah, look out for the next one. You can definitely find the next one if you go to digitalocean.com/community, if I could spell it right. And then if you go down to the bottom here, there is a creating a Laravel API. This is my next tech talk, which will happen on July 22nd. And we're going to do directly from code in Laravel, building an API. Thanks for joining. Yeah, so here we are at 11 o'clock, just a little bit past. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for everybody that helped out when I had that little JWT problem. But I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.